All right, well, it is a little past noon, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. First of all, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. This, just as a reminder, this is the third installment of our weekly What's Cooking at the Capitol um, series where we try to bring to you all of the most important legislation that is passing through the Capitol this year with relating to food and agriculture and break it down, why it's important, why it matters to you. And so today we will be talking about the why your community needs a local food needs more local food infrastructure. So we're going to do just a little bit of just the agenda for today. We're going to have a little run through on the background about Illinois Stewardship Alliance's Local Food Farmer Caucus, why this legislation is needed, what it does, and what it doesn't do, what will be the impact if it passes, where it's at right now, and then what you can do if you choose to take action and support this legislation. And then we'll have plenty of time at the end as well for questions if you have any burning questions throughout the session here. Also, feel free to use the chat liberally. We will do our best to get to answers in the chat, but again, we'll also bring those questions forward and answer them at the end of the presentation as well. So my name is Molly Pickering. I am the Deputy Director for Illinois Stewardship Alliance. And before we can talk about why the bill is important, I feel like we have to start with who created the bill. And that was our local food farmer caucus. And just for a little bit of background on the caucus, it's about 80 farmers. They're small fruit and vegetable livestock farmers. They're based around the state, and they are members of Illinois Stewardship Alliance. And these farmers, they meet quarterly to discuss what are the issues that they're facing on their farms and also talk about some possible solutions. During these quarterly meetings, they also try to work together to prioritize what are some of the most important issues that kind of they're all facing and what are some of the best solutions to those issues. And eventually, they get to the point where they help draft legislation, negotiate bill language, determine campaign strategy, and support legislation as it's moving through the state house. So they're kind of seeing the issue, developing an issue all the way from like it's a problem to introducing an actual bill. And one of the biggest issues that many of the farmers in the local food farmer caucus said that they were facing in the last several years is that they need local food infrastructure. They're having trouble getting their food to the next step, the next scale that they need to be able to feed their communities. So what they did was they created the Local Food Infrastructure Grant Act, which this year is SB 3077. And that act intends to kind of solve this issue. So I want to start with a little background too, again, on why this is an issue, why farmers are saying this is one of the biggest issues facing their community. So I have a little quote here. This is from Jess Whiston. You can see her picture there on the end. I stole this from her Facebook page, so hopefully she doesn't mind. But she said with a local food infrastructure grant, we would be able to build a space to aggregate and store products from 60 farms in the area and distribute those products to local schools and institutions. This program has the power to transform the food system in our region. So Jess has a farm. She does a lot of cool things. She grows fruits and vegetables. She grows flowers. She has a farm stand. But in order for to be able to meet the needs of the schools that she wants to serve, they need to be able to aggregate products from all the different farms because the schools want to deal with, not 60 individual farms. They want to deal with one farm who's collaborating with 60 farms. So that's what this grant program will enable her to do. So that's just one story of why this program is important, but I'm also going to toss it over. We have a few farmers here who are in the local food farmer caucus. So I also want to invite Jeff Hake to share why why the local food farmer caucus chose to prioritize this issue and what it might do for your farm.
Yeah, sure thing, Molly. Thank you. The development of infrastructure for our food and farm system is sort of, for me, it's a lot of has to do with like almost like raising the capacity and like heightening the ceiling of growth on our food and farm system in Illinois. So if we don't have um, infrastructure that individual farms and farms can work together to collaborate on, they really can't grow. There's just like a real a real limit to how much we can grow, and you see this with a lot of individual farms um, where they get stuck at a certain ceiling, and unless they can invest in huge cold storage and let's say it's like a vegetable farm of having a wash pack system, or if it's a farm like ours where it's a need for post harvest handling of our grains on our farm or milling on our farm, we can't grow beyond that. But the problem is that um, those investments are crazy expensive. They're absolutely necessary for developing a new Illinois food system, but we just can't do it. We don't have a chance of hoping to grow. I mean, an option is to take on incredibly risky financing and debt, um, and the kind of things we're trying to do are so unprecedented and so novel um, that they're just incredibly risky. So we could do that and have a very high likelihood that it could just bury us in debt that we can't recover from. Um, but what we're talking about is infrastructure that is fundamental to developing a new food system in the state. So that's why this is such an important issue for us and a lot of farmers in the local food farmer caucus.
Yeah, Jeff, do you want to share a little bit about the challenge that your farm faces with grain and why that's an issue?
Absolutely. So, right. So we grow food grade grains on a very small scale. We're in Southwest McLean County, Funks Grove Heritage Fruits and Grains, um, and we have been operating in a very particular and sort of convoluted way to grow our farm to where it is currently. So we're growing grains on the scale of like 1 acre, 4 acres, occasionally up to 10 acres, which sounds like a lot depending on what kind of production you do, but for grain production, that's an extremely small scale. Um, and the only scale appropriate and accessible food grade grain mill that we could get access to is 2.5 hours away up in Pecatonica, so up near Rockford. And that's one way. So and if you're driving a lot of grain, it takes even a little longer than 2.5 hours. Um, and we've been doing that, and it's been great. Andy Hazard has been our miller for years. She's made it affordable for us. She's an excellent mentor. She's a good friend. She's a great partner to have in all this. But she's 2.5 hours away, and she's not getting any closer. At some point, we need to be able to take care of this part of the value chain of our food, um, and stop relying on someone who's that far away to do it for us. So our hope is that establishing on-farm infrastructure for post-harvest handling and milling will allow our business actually become sustainable.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Yeah.
I'm going to toss it now to Josh. Josh, you want to explain a little bit more about your tomato issue?
Yeah, thank you, Molly. So I'm Josh Sneddon of Fox at the Fork in Moni, Illinois. So that's approximately 35 miles south of Chicago. And we faced a challenge keeping up with our tomato productivity. So we had a very strong tomato year a couple seasons ago. Um, when we first faced this challenge, the issue still sort of exists for us, but initially when we got involved with a local food infrastructure grant and proposing a solution, we had, you know, an extreme bumper crop of different types of tomatoes, whether it was heirloom tomatoes, sauce tomatoes, you name it. We couldn't keep up with getting those tomatoes from our farm to market, whether that be the farmer's market, a local food pantry that we donate to. And so, I started cottage food, thank you to those who identified that as an issue and solved it for us. But then the challenge became, okay, so I'm doing this in my home kitchen. I have to sell it direct to consumer, and I'm only one person. in one home kitchen. So we still had, an excess amount of tomatoes, and they were just frankly either going to my chickens or going to my compost pile, and that seemed like not the best use. And so we are looking for and hoping that in the near future there will be some sort of shared cannery, shared commercial kitchen space in our area where we could take our tomatoes to have them processed into, shelf stable products that can last us throughout the winter and can last our community as well. When fresh produce is not available in Illinois, at least not in abundance in those cold winter months, it would be great to be able to share, whether it be our tomato products or other canned and processed goods that are shelf stable and highly nutritious.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff and Josh, for sharing those stories about why you need local food infrastructure on your farms and in your communities. I'm going to take a step back now and just kind of give a little bit more background on this, on the bigger picture here. So, 95% of the food consumed in Illinois is shipped in from out of state. That means that every dollar that you as a consumer spend, 95% or 95 cents of that dollar is going to some kind of corporation or company that is not here in Illinois. And we all eat a lot and we're spending a lot of money on food, and that money is not staying in our communities. So, actually, about $46 billion is being spent with corporations outside of Illinois instead of being reinvested here in our small farms in our communities. We have the best farmland in the world. We can feed Illinois. Like Illinois farmers can do that. But they currently lack the infrastructure in order to move food from their farms to communities. This didn't always used to be the case. We used to have, mills, butcher shops, grocery stores, trucking, processing facilities in every community or close in every region. And those would help support local food production and distribution. But an emphasis in the last 50 years on commodities and consolidation has gutted that infrastructure. So now there's more corporations in charge controlling the food system and less, and a lot of those small grocery stores and small farms and small food businesses were kind of pushed out. And so a lot of that infrastructure no longer exists here in Illinois. Small farmers do not have access to the types of loan programs and financing that they need to afford this very expensive infrastructure, which Jeff was alluding to. Like they can take out a loan but they're going to be underwater in debt. It's just really not feasible for them to afford this massive infrastructure that our regions need in order to be able to feed themselves. So, oops, I'm going too far here. So this grant program help solve that problem by creating a grant program that is going to be able to give farms and food businesses access to the funding that they need to start this type of infrastructure in their community. Neighboring states of Michigan, Missouri, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Kentucky, and many other states across the nation already have this type of grant program. They've already identified this issue, they're already tackling it, and Illinois does not. So we felt like this was a really great solution that we should be pursuing here in Illinois. So what does this bill do? It creates a $2 million minimum state-funded grant program to help farmers and food businesses, livestock processors, cooperatives, local governments. So it's not just limited to farmers. A very wide array of entities can apply for this. It helps them to afford and purchase equipment for processing, milling, refrigeration, trucking, food hubs, community kitchens, as an example. All these little pieces of infrastructure that help move food from farms to communities. So the maximum grant award would be $225,000. And the bill also sets up a steering committee to develop criteria for reviewing the applications. And then it also asks applicants to match grant funds with comparable investments or to demonstrate high need for the project in their community. So this piece of the grant ensures, or the program ensures, that state investment is doubled with matching comparable investments, or that it is going to the areas and projects with the highest need. What it does not do, we believe, does not request a sum of money that is an unreasonable investment for the state. This is the $2 million was kind of looking at other grant programs as a starting point, that's where we felt like this was a very reasonable ask for Illinois. So if this bill passes, who's going to benefit? So first of all, it's going to be all small farms, food businesses, and communities are going to have access to this funding. But in terms of health impact, we can kind of break this down into health impact, equity impact, and there's one more, I'll get to it. But in terms of health impact, families, schools, institutions, and communities will benefit from greater access to fresh, healthy, minimally processed foods. As far as equity impact, the grant program prioritizes small scale and socially disadvantaged farmers. So that ensures that that the state is investing in those types of farms and food businesses that have historically not had equitable access to these resources. And the program prioritizes projects that serve communities in need. So that also ensures that the state is investing equitably in the areas of highest need. And economic impact, that was the last impact. We can expect to see a 20% increase in local production, processing, and purchasing. We can expect to see a $20 to $30 billion economic growth annually in the state's borders, which is, a pretty incredible number. And of course, we all benefit from a more resilient local food system and more power in the hands of farmers in our state. So how will you and your community be impacted if this bill passes? State funds will be directly invested with farms and food businesses in your region, which means more thriving businesses in your community and a stronger local economy in your community. And hopefully you will also see an increase in availability of locally grown food in schools, grocery stores, farmers markets, all the places where you buy your food. This might not happen immediately, but once this infrastructure gets up and going, especially hopefully down the road, if there are several rounds of grant funding, you're going to see an increase in local food production in Illinois. So this is a small amount of funding with a very big impact. This first round of, so the grant program was funded last year for the first time ever. And so we have a couple initial stats to share with you. So over 250 farms and food businesses applied for more than 23 million in funding in the first year of the grant program. 23 million in grant funding for a $2 million grant. So there's a huge demand out there for this type of program. 90% of the applicants were underserved farmers and food businesses or nonprofits, maybe I just got that wrong. 90% of the applicants were underserved farmers or they collaborated with underserved farmers. I need to go back. Sorry about that. 1 second. I'm not used to running the slideshow. So 90% of the applicants were underserved farmers or collaborated with underserved farmers or food businesses or nonprofits. And then 80% of the projects were intended to serve underserved communities as defined by the CDC's High Vulnerability Index. 19 projects were awarded. Some of this is, we're going to have a grant an announcement on March 20th. So some of this is a little early, so you're getting a little bit of an inside scoop here. So 19 projects were awarded with an average of $94,000 award. So again, that's a $94,000 award's pretty high. Again, not something that most farmers can traditionally take on, small farmers. Projects were located across the state, both urban and rural. Projects awarded were as far down south as Southern Illinois, Carbondale area, Peoria area, Joe Davies, Cook County. So they were all across the state. The awarded projects included 3 commercial kitchens, 2 meat processing plants, 9 food hubs, 3 refrigerated trucks, and 2 grain mills. So really exciting projects they're going to help build the local food supply chain here in Illinois. And again, there's going to be a press release on March 20th to officially announce all of the award recipients. So keep your eyes on your email because you're going to get an email in a couple of days that lets you know who won. All right. So where is the bill right now? So first of all, there's two goals for this legislation. One is we want to pass the bill because what the bill does is it actually creates this program in state statute. So last year, during when this program was funded, no bill was actually passed. Funds were just appropriated, but no bill. There was no bill that says this is how you have to use these funds. So we need to get the bill into state statute so that there are guidelines for how the funding should be used successive so that this program can exist for several, many more years, hopefully. And then we also need to secure a second round of appropriations. So we got $2 million last year to make this fund possible. We were asking for $2 million again to be able to distribute the funds again. So farmers in the local food farmer caucus have been working really hard to get in touch with lawmakers. They actually had a mini lobby day last week. They talked with many lawmakers who are in the Senate Ag Committee and the Senate Appropriations Committee. And because of their hard work, the bill actually passed out of the Senate Ag Committee last week. So that's really exciting news. It's moving forward. So where it will be now is it has to be voted upon on the Senate floor. So then once it gets off the Senate floor, hopefully in the next few weeks, whenever it gets called, then it will move over to the House. And then it will go through the same process in the House where it will be assigned to a committee, probably House Ag Committee. Will have to get out of committee and then it will go to the House floor for a full vote. So we've passed the first initial hurdle, which is great. So there's like 3 more steps down the line that we still have to get through. But the Senate Ag Committee was really supportive of the bill, and we're anticipating that this is going to move forward well and won't have that much opposition. Still, though, we would really love your support to make sure that your senator knows about this bill and votes in favor of it when it gets called. So we do have an action alert. Let's see if I can drop this link in. Oh, I'm going to have to get out of the full slideshow. And if you take action on this action alert, it will send an email to your senator asking them to support the bill. So I'm just going to drop this in the chat. So that's one step. Like I said, we have to pass the bill, but we also need to secure appropriations. And appropriations goes through a different process than a bill, and it's a little bit murkier. But what we do know is that we want to talk to all the members who are on an appropriations committee. And so stay tuned because if you are in a district where your senator is in an appropriations committee, we might be sending you an email asking you to give them a phone call or asking you to get in contact with them to ask them to support this appropriations. So stay tuned for that. And then lastly, if you're a farmer, you can join the local food farmer caucus to get more involved in this work by following this link here. I'm going to drop that in the chat as well. All right. And I think it's time for questions now. So let's see, I'm going to try to get back through here. Carrie asked, could you share the state infographic? Yes, we will share that. It's not quite public yet, so we'll share that on March 20th when it is publicly available. Josh, are you collaborating with Will? This is a question for you, Josh, from Bob. Are you collaborating with Will County Health Department Food and Nutrition Access Group and its efforts to raise $5 million to build out a community kitchen infrastructure in 4 social service agencies?
So I'm not working with them directly. I am aware of the project that's going on and the efforts, but I have not been directly involved in them.
Sounds like a pretty cool project, Bob. Thanks for bringing that up. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Jen Abbey. I serve on the board of Shared Harvest Co-op. We're a stage 2B startup food cooperative in Elgin with over 1,000 members and are looking forward to finding our site to open our store to support all the farmers who are doing all of this hard work. My question is, and I guess I'll know more on March 20th, right? But are there certain regions of the state that are hurting more when it comes to infrastructure, or is it kind of all across Illinois?
It's pretty widespread across Illinois. And there's just so many different types of infrastructure that are lacking all across Illinois. For example, there's one live chicken processor and that serves almost the entire state of Illinois. And then when it comes to grain mills, like just, two or three really across the state. And then if you go to canneries and community kitchens, like we know community kitchens are a huge problem. Access to those, the next level up from cottage food. We've heard from so many folks across the state that they can't access the community kitchen. So it's just kind of across the board. There's all kinds of different infrastructure is needed for different things, and it's needed all across the state.
Thanks.
Yep, great question. All right. Well, if you have more questions, don't be shy. In the meantime, let's if you are interested or hungry for more information about some of the most important food and farm legislation, our next What's Cooking on the Capitol episode will be next Monday at 12 noon, and that is going to be discussing the Healthy School Meals for All campaign that will be presented by Catherine Bernstein. That is an effort to create free school lunches for all schools in Illinois and create more equitable access to school lunch. And hopefully down the line, we'll be able to get some more local food into those school lunches as well. Thank you. We got one more question. Let's see. Carrie asks, how will this bill affect farmers markets? That's a great question, Carrie. I think it's not designed to like do anything specific around farmers markets. But I think what it will do is it might support more farmers in growing thriving businesses so that you could see potentially more farmers and food of more types of like the value added processed foods like canned goods and jams, jellies, pickles, more of those things at farmers markets. You can already sell it through farmers markets via cottage food, but with more infrastructure, you might see more of those things at farmers markets. Just going back to the example of Jess, like her, what she was hoping to do was be able to aggregate product from 60 farms. And so if the farmers have another revenue stream where they can sell to schools, that makes their businesses more profitable. And that means that maybe they can go to more farmers markets, or maybe they'll choose not to too. Maybe they'll say, okay, well, I have this other revenue stream that's working. So it just gives farmers more choice and hopefully increases more of the types of products that you want to see. Bob is asking, why only ask for 2 million? Is the strategy to secure appropriation now and expand to meet the need once state statute is in place? Look, we went for 2 million because that's what we got last year, and there was absolutely no guarantee that we would be able to get it again this year. Anytime you're working in the state budget, it's just always risky. So we went for 2 million, thinking that was just reasonable to ask for the same amount. Now, when we were in the Senate Ag Committee, there was talk from the senators about maybe we should be, this sounds like a really great program, maybe we should be trying to get more in the state budget for this program. So there were some senators calling for a higher amount. We'll see if that pans out. Of course, we would be thrilled to get more funding for this very needed program. And 2 million really is just a drop in the bucket. So we're crossing our fingers that we'll get the 2 million, but also hoping that maybe now that we've talked to senators, that they will see the need for this program and they will also go to bat for more. But in that action alert, you can also edit the content to ask your senator to support an increase in the funding as well. So if that's something you want to ask your senator for, we would greatly appreciate that. And again, that's an action alert that I dropped in earlier. There's already kind of pre-formatted content that you can send to your senator, but you can edit that to say whatever you'd like. Annie's asking, do you have an example of a community kitchen that is up and running? I'm struggling to think of any. Josh, Jeff, do you know? I think there might be a couple in Chicago. So part of the problem with community kitchens and shared kitchens is that the regulations also are not always set up to support them.
Right.
So different counties have different regulations. So I think the Chicago Cook County has probably some of the best regulations in the state, and that's why there's a couple up there. But they're down in other areas of the state, they're a little bit more laborious to navigate.
Yeah, I can add there's Urban Canopy Chicago has um like a shared kitchen space. They don't broadly advertise it because of bandwidth. Like they produce so much food themselves, they don't always have bandwidth to support um, many individuals in the community. Um, but they do their best to do it and process when they have time and resources available to do so.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And I think Liz just dropped in a map from Pick Your Own for a listing of some of the commercial kitchens. Great. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. If anyone wants to stay on and chat further, maybe Nathan, you can cut the live stream and we can chat a little bit more. Otherwise, I really appreciate all you're doing to learn about this issue and hope you will consider taking action. And stay tuned for next week.